Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Wilson Jr., and this is the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast, the music podcast on where I interview singers and musicians from genres of black music: gospel, jazz, blues, old school classic soul, old school hip hop, today's hip hop and R&B, Caribbean, Latin, Afrobeat, Afro-Latina, blue-eyed soul, disco, go-go, line dances, and the Lost 45s. So come with me as I take you on to a trip to the destination genre of black music right now on the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Legal Shield is a proud sponsor of the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Have you been involved in any types of accidents? Have you been a victim of identity theft? Have you been a victim of a computer fraud scam? Have you been in disputes with your tenants or landlords? If your loved one dies and they didn't write up a will for you or for your family, or you and your spouse are filing for divorce, or if you need help by opening up your small business, give Legal Shield a try. Visit their website at LegalShield.com and tell them you heard it here on the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Do it today. You'll be glad you did. Welcome to the Black Soul Music Experience. I'm Sam Wilson Jr., and I have a special guest on my show. And this gentleman that I'm about to introduce is my maternal cousin, representing the Thomas Bowles Jones family. He was the guitar and bass player for the music band Slave. I'm sure you out there in the audience remember the group Slave back in the mid-70s. Remember the song Slide, or Just a Touch of Love, Little Bit, or the other one, Walking Down the Street, Watching Ladies Roll By, Watching You. Yep, those were the songs, and he was a member of that band. After the band departed ways, he went on with a duo group called Aurra, that spells A-U-R-R-A, and then later changed his name to Deja. Today, he is the founder and the lead singer of the Curt Jones Band, and you can find all of his music available right now on iTunes, and check out his videos right now on YouTube. Please help me welcome to the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast, ladies and gentlemen, my maternal cousin, Mr. Curt Jones. Hey, cuz, how are you?
How are you, cuz? It's a pleasure being here, man. Really great.
Welcome to my podcast. Glad to have you back. I interviewed you on season 3, but it was on audio. In other words, telephone.
Yeah.
Remember back in the
Right.
days when you had those public affair programs with anyone in the studio, but if the guests couldn't make it, they would do it over the phone. So
That's
now,
right.
this is my second time having you back, but the first time having you on my video podcast. So it's a pleasure to have you back. I said to myself, I got to interview my cousin again. So we're into those technology times. So, with
Yeah.
AI and all that other stuff going around. But it's like the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Or it's like the old saying, sometimes you got to play around with it until you get used to it. I know, because when I started doing it last season, the problem was when I was trying to interview my guest,
Mm-hmm.
I ended up being the guest and she ended up being the host. So I had to take it up to Yonkers and do the whole thing. So this is something new
Sometimes,
for season 5. So I know what you're saying, but I
sometimes
gotta
it
get
works
used to
that
it.
way. Whatever makes the boat float.
Yeah. So anyway, as I said, it's a pleasure to have you back on my podcast. And it's a pleasure to see you face to face. So let us begin, shall we? Now,
Sure.
last time, you're originally from Linden, New Jersey. You and your sister, cousin Lisa,
Right.
originally from
Right.
Linden, New Jersey. So
Mm-hmm.
the last time we talked, you was in the band called Slave. And what year have you joined the band, and how long were you in the band before it parted ways?
Well, the band was actually in progress and had the first three albums out before I actually joined. And I had a band called Star Child that uh, Starlina Young was in that band with me, and we were playing clubs, and my aunt Penny Davenport was managing our band, and she through managing she would get us engagements at different clubs all throughout Jersey and all that. And she one night when she was out, she met Steve Washington, who was the leader of Slave, but Slave hadn't come out yet. But she met him and started talking with him, and he started telling her what he was doing. So she asked him to come down to our rehearsal so that he could speak with us and make a connection. And that led to him coming down and helping us. And then eventually it had him helping us, and then he started actually taking over managing us and was trying to get us a record deal and had us in the studio working and was supporting us. So um, that was in, I want to say, like 77 when their album hadn't was just about to come out. He was coming to our rehearsals, helping us in our rehearsals, and he told me he and I became friends, just made a connection. You know, we're both born in September. His birthday is like 3 days from mine. I just had a birthday on Sunday. His was the 18th, mine's the 21st. And we connected, and he was talking to me. He said, you know, my band has an album. You know, we're about to release a record. You know, we're just getting the contractual things finalized with Atlantic Records. And I said, really? I said, man, that's great, man. And he kept helping us and coming to our rehearsals. And one night he came and said, everything's finalized. We got the paper signed. The album's going to come out. I said, really? I said, I can't wait to hear it. He said, I got a copy of it on reel to reel. I said, I have a reel to reel tape machine up in my room. So after rehearsal, he came up and said, let's play it. He brought it up and we put it on the reel to reel. And I'm like, you know, I didn't know what to expect. I said, well, this guy's been helping us for so long and really giving his all. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but even if it's not all that great or doesn't reach me, I'm going to be positive about it. And I didn't have to think like that. He put the reel on and hit play, and the first thing I heard was Slide. And my jaw dropped, my eyes got big, and I said, that's your band, man? He said, yeah. All I could say was, that's really nice, man. That's really nice. I was just blown away. And we just continued our friendship, and he kept trying to work with us. You know, at one point in time, Starlina had left our band and went ahead with him and started working with him on the Slave's third album, which was called The Concept, that had the single Stellar Funk. And I stayed back with my band Star Child. We were still working on trying to get things going, you know, and we kept doing that. And then our band, our bass player in our band, Ray Jackson, who was a phenomenal bass player in our hometown. We were lucky to get him in our band when we got him. When we got him, we thought we had made the big time because he was already a legend in our hometown. Everybody knew who he was. And he heard us and liked us. And he said, yeah, I'll join the band. So he was in our band, but At that time, he made a change, and he went to L.A. and left the band and went to L.A. So we spent about a year trying to find a bass player that could fill his shoes, but that was going to be hard to do. We already knew that was going to be hard to do because Ray Jackson's a legendary bass. He played on some of the Aurra tracks. He later played on Mtume's records. He was the legendary bass player that played on Mtume's hit Juicy Fruit and You, Me, and He and all that stuff. So Ray was accomplished for a long time, you know. But when he left, we never found a replacement for him. So the band kind of disbanded. We all got jobs and we were working. And I want to say this is like 78 going into 79. And one day I was working one of my part-time jobs, cleaning up a bank in Linden, New Jersey. And I had access to the phones then. There was no cell phones then, but I had access to phones. And something made me just call Stevie because we always used to talk and stay connected. And I reached out and called him. He said, man, he said, I'm glad you called. I was just thinking about calling you. There's some things I wanted to talk to you about. I said, for real? I said, yeah. I said, I'm just here at work. I'm finishing up. He said, I'd like you to come up to the house. I want to have a meeting with you. So I went up to his house. He had it all laid out. He had been planning. Evidently, he had been planning for a while before I even knew. He said, I'd like you to come and join the production company that I have going here. And you, Steve Arrington, had already joined on the third album, and Starlene had joined on the third album, The Concept. And they were getting ready to start a new record. And he said, I'd like you to come in, you and Star and Arrington, join the production company. I'm not going to sign you into Slave's recording agreement with Atlantic because there's things that I'm trying to clear up, and there's a lot of things that were just in turmoil. He said, I don't want to affect your career with all that. That's ongoing, and it has to be worked out. But you, Arrington, and Star will be able to work with the group, write with the group, sing, perform when we perform live, and record with the group. But I won't have you signed into it. I'll have you signed to the production company so we can release like a project on you. I can release a project on Star. I can release a project on Steve Arrington. And he had all this on paper, already slated out and everything. I said, well, sure, man, absolutely. I'd love to be a part of all this. And that's how it got going. This was going into 79. And we immediately started working together on music. And I was just glad to be around. I thought I was going to be able to just perform with the band and when they went out but he had us in the studio, and he said, "Oh no, you're going to write songs. You give me ideas." I started writing on songs for the next project, and lo and behold, that next project became the Just a Touch of Love album. And we worked on that at the House of Music in West Orange, and some of it in Atlantic Studios in New York. And that's where the ball got in 1979. And we got the record done and went out on the first tour for that. At the end of that year, it was right before Christmas, when we went, beginning of December, they had booked dates to start right at the end, right after Christmas, going into the new year. And the first dates were in Texas, down here in Houston and Dallas, Fort Worth. And the first dates were with Phyllis Hyman and the OJs. And we went to Dayton the 1st of December and rehearsed for a whole month and got ready. And that's when we went out. Just a Touch of Love was already out. It had made noise and had proven itself on the charts and became the hit that it was. That just got the ball rolling.
Now, you mentioned Dayton, Ohio. Was the group founded in Dayton, Ohio, or was it formed back in New Jersey, where you was at before
The
it got
group,
on the
the
road?
group, Group was founded in Dayton, Ohio. Steve Washington was from New Jersey, from East Orange, New Jersey. And he was a prodigy trumpet player, musician, whiz at sound. And he was only a teenager. Now, this is the most interesting and the most intriguing part of the story that you, it was just, I just felt honored to be a part of all of it. Stevie and I became good friends, but he was this prodigy trumpet player in East Orange, New Jersey. His uncle was Pee Wee, the trumpet player of the Ohio Players. The Ohio Players were in their heyday playing and doing, and like, with the Ohio Players, they made history when the original R&B bands to cross over without compromising their sound. And part of that was marketing strategy. They never had a picture of themselves on the cover of the album. They always had a beautiful woman on the front of the album. And that music crossed color lines, everything, and just made its way where we grew up seeing Ohio Players on Don Kirshner's rock concert, where you didn't see a lot of other black acts on that because that was crossover. Players crossed over without ever compromising their sound. Well, Stevie's uncle Pee Wee was a trumpet player. He had a car accident that year and lost some of his teeth and couldn't blow the trumpet for quite a while because that messes up your embouchure for playing the trumpet. They called Stevie in East Orange to come out and take his uncle's place. Now, Stevie was a teenager, I say about 15, 16 years old, went out there, played with the players in their heyday. And not only that, he was a whiz with sound and worked with them in the studio, was working with them in the studio on the records. And he was just amazing. He was with that band. And while he was there in Dayton, Ohio, he started meeting musicians and meeting friends. He met Mark Adams. He met Drac from Slave. He met some of the members, musicians, and started working with them. And lo and behold, started forming a band. And that's how Slave got going. He was already out there working with the players, but he met some of his own friends and some talent that he thought was, strong enough to put some time and effort into it. And that's how Slave began. Met Mark Adams, the bass player, Drac, the guitarist, did the solo on Slide, Danny Webster, and the rest of the other members, Floyd Miller, Tom Lockett, and they put the band together and started working. And they started working with this band, but the interesting thing is, like most bands in that time, that was the band era, and bands went out and played in clubs to get their chops together, and then later maybe be able to get a record deal. That wasn't the approach that Stevie took with Slave. They originally came together to start writing original material and recording. And they started ideas and started recording. And then he brought them out to Jersey to friends of his that owned a studio that later became the famous House of Music studio in West Orange, but it was in Sayreville first. And Charlie Conrad and his wife Irene Conrad, he recorded the first Slave album there at that studio with them. And the rest was history. It took off.
Yeah. Wow. I interviewed Eliza Gomez Taylor a few weeks ago, and she's from Dayton, Ohio, and she mentioned Slave and the Ohio Players and Zach.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to myself,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay. So now we're getting the picture. And you mentioned
Yeah.
the Ohio Players because I have a couple of LPs, and you mentioned, you know, you don't
Mm-hmm.
see them on the front or the back album, but you see a lady on
Right.
every album covers. I
Yeah.
mean, I have two albums. I have Skin Tight, and I also have Honey. So those are the two album covers that I have. And just like you said, they wasn't on the front or the back album cover. They just have a lady on every album cover. It's like
Mm-hmm.
5 of them, nonstop. You know,
That's right.
that's their group. And when I saw an episode on TV One's Unsung, when I saw the
Mm-hmm.
whole band, you mentioned Pee Wee with the trumpet player,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was another one who had that turban. I forgot his name. I think it was
That's
Marshall
that's Marsh
Jones.
that's Marshall Jones, the bass player. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sugarfoot, he's the one who got that double bass.
Double neck.
The first
Yes.
time I've seen a double bass before. Never
Well, that's
seen it.
actually a double guitar,
Mm,
double neck guitar. It's some. I think it was one was 6 string and the other might have been 12 string, but he always had a double neck. I think a double neck SG. It looked like a Gibson SG double neck. And
wow.
for young cats like us coming up and meeting Stevie and all that, but coming up even before I met Stevie, young cats like that. Now, of course, Jimi Hendrix was the ultimate guitar hero, but in the '70s in R&B, you know, Sugarfoot was a hero because for any young brother learning to play guitar and being trying to play funk and R&B, here is Sugarfoot on Don Kirshner's rock concert and in concert, all these crossover shows, playing and doing his thing and just shredding it, singing, and he just paved the way. It was like he was a hero of any young brother playing guitar. Just not just a brother, but anybody that was interested in anything that sounded good. But especially for young brothers who were just cutting their teeth on R&B, Sugarfoot was that dude. Now, here's a story about that because when I got out there, I told you we rehearsed for a whole month with Slave for the Just a Touch tour. We finished a rehearsal one night and Stevie said, "Come on, man." I said, "Where we going?" He said, "Just come on." We got in the car and we drove. I didn't know where we were going. We were in Dayton, Ohio. I was just going where Stevie was going. Well, we drove and we pulled up into this house and to a driveway. And they must have already talked because we pulled up into the driveway and I saw somebody standing in the driveway. And I said, "Well, where are we going?" And we pulled up in there, got out the car, standing in the driveway. It was Sugarfoot. And Stevie introduced me to him, and he introduced Sugar to me. He said, "Yeah, man, this is Curt. Man, this is the cat, that I was telling you about." And it's like, and, and I was at a loss for words, man. I'm standing there looking at Sugarfoot. He had the hair, the mustache, the whole cool thing, and he was just smiling. He had that smile, and I was like, "Hey, man," I just shook his hand. It was a pleasure, man. And he was like, "Yeah, man." He was just as cool and gracious. He was, "Yeah, man, I just love to play music for a living, and do this." I'm like, I was just speechless, man. I just met the cat that I probably just got finished watching about a few months ago on in concert. This Sugar, and I got all his albums. I got a bunch of the Hall Players albums. And the ones you mentioned, and the one with Fire on it, and all of that, all of those, even some before Billy Beck was there when Junie Morrison was the lead vocalist and keyboardist. So the Players were heroes of ours for a long time, man. When we were just learning about playing in bands, Players were out there having hits then. And so we were cutting our teeth on them. And Sugarfoot was just a true hero, man. He was just as cool as he could be. I was through with that. And I didn't even know what to say to Stevie. I was like, "Thank you, man. That was everything to me, you know."
Wow. And speaking of the Ohio Players, when their early song, Funky Worm, and you hear that thing in the
Yeah.
background, And that song had paved the way, and they were influenced by the hip hop rappers off the West Coast. When I hear
Hmm.
that funky worm sound back there,
Yeah,
all of the hip hop rappers from the West Coast, they were
that's right.
influenced by it.
That's right.
So many of the groups, they were influenced by hip hop. And
That's
yes, they
right.
were sampling everything. So
That's right.
wow, that was a wonderful experience. You got a chance to meet Sugar for the
Oh
first
man,
time. Wow.
that's, that's
Y-
amazing, man. Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
to our audience that may not know, the group Slave was on Atlantic's Cotillion label, and their hit Slide was number one on Billboard's Soul Singles charts. I believe it was back in late 1977, early 1978.
That's
And
right.
when I look at those album covers, the first three album covers, I was like, wow. Just like the Ohio Players, when I see the
Hmm.
first album, you have a guy holding a baby. And then
Hmm.
another album cover, you have a guy in stone holding something. I don't know if it's a ball or stone or something like that. But,
Right.
I look at those album covers, it's kind of like intriguing. And
Hmm.
everywhere you go, you mention the song Just a Touch of Love back in December 1979 when I first heard that song on 107.5 WBLS and their sister station Amber 90 WLIB. I was like, whoa, that is my jam right there. And once I hear it, they'll be playing at the clubs on Friday nights. So they get the people tapping and get on the dance floor and
That's
everything.
correct. Yeah.
Yes. Now,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, I wish TV1 would do an episode of Unsung on the band and everything. If TV1 had Unsung was still around, they would have do an episode on the group anyway. Now, after the band disbanded, uh, you had a lady, I forgot the name when I mentioned the Aurra. What's the lady's name who had sung with you?
You mean for Aura? Yeah.
Yes.
That was Starlina Young.
Oh, Star Child, correct?
Right. Well, Star Child was the band, but Starlina Young, that's her name. That was just her name. And she was part of that band with us. And then late, and as I said, she moved on and started working with Stevie in the group Slave, the album before I came. And that was the third album, The Concept. Yeah. And we worked together, on the rest of the records that we were a part of. There, the Just Touch of Love album and the Stone Jam album, which were pretty much the most significant records that they made since the first one. And then they did one after that was the Party Lights album, which was really another strong one as well, that had Wait For Me on it. But we had already disbanded, parted ways. There was a lot of different business things going on, and plus there was so many members. The band had so much talent. It was almost inevitable that it's like water seeking its own level. You know, talent had to go different directions in order to be able to reflect what they were about. And Slade went one way, and Stevie chose to go another way, and with me and with Tom Lockett and Starlina, and we formed Aurra. But the first Aurra album was formed while we were still recording, uh, finishing recording the Stone Jam album. We had studio time, and we booked studio time in Blank Tapes in New York, which is a studio in New York, and we started recording tracks for a new project, which became Aurra and became a single for Steve Arrington. And so the first Aurra album was just entitled Aurra. And it there was no duet at that time. I was just the lead vocalist. And everybody that was involved in the camp was on that track. Like Mark Adams and was playing bass on some of it. Uh, Steve Arrington was playing drums on it. We were all and Floyd Miller, the trombonist and percussionist from Slave, was on it, playing and singing, and they all were singing backgrounds. We had people from that also wound up becoming the group called Young and Company, uh, Starlina's brothers, and bass player by the name of Buddy Hankerson, who played on the first Aurra album as well, and he became a bass player for Steve Arrington's Hall of Fame. So it was all an in-house, in-camp project. And I remember when we were doing this because we were at a question. We were figuring out how we were going to go about moving forward, and we hadn't signed any contracts yet or whatever. And Stevie Stevie's family, funny, it's weird how his family knew a lot of my father's family before we even knew each other. So my grandmother had just passed in '79. We had touch out and everything, and but we were figuring out how to move forward. We wanted to record some new stuff and do this, and um, we were at the wake at my grandmother's house, and Steve and his mom came down to support us. And I know I was just kind of just thinking about my whole world was changing. Grandma, my mama, she just passed, and I said, where am I going with this? And Stevie came down. We started talking, and I told him, I said, Steve, man, I said, man, you know what? We ain't got nothing to lose, man. Let's just go ahead and. We had been talking with South Soul about the possibility of doing something, and I said, man, let's just do it, Stevie, man. I'll sign a contract. I don't care. Let's just go for something, man. We got to do something because I just felt like it was a page had turned. My grandmother just passed. I said, well, I was like what 21 or something like that. I said we gotta do something. And so we moved forward. He said, yeah. He said, okay. And we went and moved forward, had a meeting with Salsoul, and I signed the agreement for the first Aurra project, and that's how it got going. We did the first Aurra album. One of the slammingest tracks on there was called When I Come Home. Had a combination of Steve Arrington on drums, Mark Adams on bass. I was playing guitar, and some of Slave and some of the acquaintances that we knew, people vocalists that we knew, was singing background on it. Star was singing background. Arrington, myself, and I think a young lady by the name of Carmilla De Lemos, she was singing background on some of that. We had uh, Pick Pick from the group Surface, who started the group Surface. Pick came and we had him come in. He did percussion on the record and did some percussion. He did some flute on the record because he played woodwinds, flute, saxophone, and percussion. Brilliant musician. Just he was on that first record, and it was just like a melting pot of Stevie's crew that he knew from coming up in East Orange. A lot of great talent, plus Slave from Dayton, Ohio. So it just that's how we got going.
Okay. Now, you mentioned your self-titled debut LP on the South Soul label. Every time I think of South Soul, I think of the South Soul Orchestra. You know,
Hmm.
some of its members from MFSB and
Hmm.
all of that. They all think of Philly, so the South Soul Orchestra. So I would never knew that South Soul Records would have some other artists, including
Hmm.
Sky and your group and everything. So every time I think of South Soul, I think of the South Soul Orchestra coming out of Italy. So that
Yeah,
was the record label that I grew up on back in the
yeah,
70s.
yeah.
Now, after the group changed its name to Deja, and I got a chance to see the music video on Video Music Box. That's the video music program
Hmm.
that used to be on WNYC TV channel
Okay.
31 before it
Uh-huh.
switched over to WNYE TV channel 25. And I saw the music video called You and Me Tonight. So
Hmm.
I got a chance to check out that music video.
Right. Right. Yeah, that became one of the biggest hits that we had, because when we first started recording that record, now this is after you moved on to Deja, so this is like when we started recording this, uh, Starlene and I and Steve Washington had parted ways. We weren't working together anymore. And we took control of our own career, Starlene and I, and we started working to try to get things going. We were recording things, trying to get a deal, and we got connected with the album before that, which was it was still called Aurra, and it was on Next Plateau Records, which was distributed by Virgin Records in London and in all of Europe. So when we had a hit from that takeoff over in Europe from that record called Like I Like It, they flew us over to London and we went over and did a bunch of promotional dates behind that record. And then behind that record and doing those promotional dates, we got to meet person to person the people involved at Virgin Records, Virgin 10 Records in London, who actually signed. We were signed to what they were the major label that distributed for Next Plateau, because Next Plateau at that time was an independent label. They didn't have Salt and Pepper yet. They didn't have nothing. Everything they did was distributed by 10 Records over in London. Well, we were. They had some other projects. I think there were some other projects that were distributed by MCA, and so like the independents had a major to do the distribution, and Virgin 10 was the major that did the distribution for us with Next Plateau. And in meeting with them, and I had already talked. It was a meeting that didn't really. I don't think Next Plateau, they didn't like the way the outcome of what my decision was, but they asked if they wanted to try to sign us for a couple more years, and I just said, no, I just want to do 1 year, the one record, because they were an independent label, and what I felt like we were in the same place that we were with Salsa. Salsa was an independent label, and RCA did all of their distribution, and that's how the world found out about the stuff that we did on Salsa, because RCA was a major distribution company. They distributed it all over the world, which was great. We get royalties from different places all over the world because it was a major distribution situation. Next Plateau had that with Virgin. So I told them I only wanted to do 1 year. When we went over and met the executives at Virgin Records, at 10 Records, they spoke with us, saw me and Starlene in the hall, and I think it was Richard Griffin, who was at that time one of the execs that was a major player in that. He said, we love what you're doing. He said, we understand that you have a contract that's about to expire. And I said, yeah. I said, that was by design, because I felt like an independent. At that time, you got to remember, we were talking about the 80s, and videos were coming into a major play of your career. If you weren't shooting a video to promote your single, you weren't really considered serious. And we had just left a situation that wasn't a part of that yet with Salsa. And Next Plateau was the same way. And I said, let's do one album with this, and maybe let's see what our options will be. And Richard Griffith said, well, we know that your contract expires at a certain time. We do not want to step on any toes on the agreement that we have with Next Plateau. But when your agreement does expire, we'd love to fly you over and talk about signing you to Virgin. That's how we got signed. I said, I'd love that. And when it expired, that's what took place. We went over and got signed to 10 Records to London. We were actually considered a British act because we signed to 10 Records, which was Virgin in London.
Right.
So when You and Me Tonight came out, what was happening was it's a song that had like a cat that had 9 lives. Like the first year blew up all over the world and here in the States. But because it was released overseas and they didn't have at that time 10 records, they didn't have a major distribution situation set up for us. They did for certain acts that they had that had already been signed, which was Soul to Soul. They were in the MCA did a lot of their major distribution for them because 10 Records was an independent, but they had Virgin behind them and they had major distribution and they had deep pockets and they were moving forward into the video age because Soul to Soul was hot. They signed quite a few things. So once we did that, we got that record came out and it came out over in the States, but it got played all over the radio. People were loving it, and especially in New York, but you couldn't buy it because it wasn't released to sell over here. It was an overseas release. So by the time we went over to London and signed the deal with Virgin, we started Mick Clark, who was the God rest his soul, he was the A&R director and our A&R director that signed us. He signed Soul to Soul as well. He signed a lot of great acts through Virgin Records. Had us and called us and said, okay, we want to start a record. And he called and said, we're interested in trying to do, now we're talking about 85, 86. He said, after the Like I Like It record, 86, he said, we want to get started on starting a new record. We want to talk to Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis to see if we can get you connected with them. We really feel strongly about this. What happened was they reached out, but Jimmy and Terry's schedule was so busy that, and we're talking about the fall of 86, Jimmy and Terry weren't going to be able to be open to do anything new until February into the next year. That Virgin did not want to wait that long. So they said, okay, Jimmy and Terry are too busy. But what happened was Monty Moyer from the group The Time, who worked with Jimmy and Terry on a lot of their projects, on the Janet Jackson record and Alexander O'Neal records, he had just parted ways from working with Jimmy and Terry. And Mick Clark had gotten in contact with him and he heard about us and heard that we were trying to get produced by Jimmy and Terry. And somehow Mick and Monty started talking and Monty said, oh yeah, I know Aurra, I love them. Yeah, I'd love to take a shot at that. So Mick called us and said, Jimmy and Terry schedule will not permit us to get started on our time clock. But what I found was interesting that Monty Moyer from The Time was very interested. He knows who you are. And I said, yeah, I know. He said, do you know who Monty was? I said, yeah, I know Monty. I know who Monty is. And Star wasn't quite as familiar with him at that time. And all I had to do was name a couple of songs. I said, Star, If You Were Here Tonight, Alexander O'Neal. She said, oh my God, that's my jam. I said, that's Monty. So at that time, she said she was sold with that. So Mick said, oh, so you really like that? I said, absolutely. I'd love to work with Monty. He said, great. We'll coordinate a meeting. we'll fly up to Minneapolis, meet Monty and his manager, and just have a weekend of meetings and just talk about everything. This was in July. Went, met Monty, met his manager, Star and I, and our manager and their manager, and we started talking. And Mick Clark from Virgin Records. And the meetings went so great. We were at the Marriott downtown Minneapolis, and we were having lunch one day, and we're sitting there eating lunch, having a meeting, and look over across the table, and there's Herb Alpert sitting at the table. And we saw him, and Monty saw him, and Monty went over and said, "Hey, Monty," he said, "Yeah, Jimmy and Terry, they're working on a project with you, because Jimmy and Terry were working on Herb Alpert's Keep Your Eye on Me record, that big record that they did with him." And Herb Alpert is a legendary record executive of A&M. Herb Alpert's Tijuana Brass. I was a kid hearing his records on A&M radio. This guy was a legend in music already. And he was sitting there like a kid at Christmas saying, "Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm getting ready to work with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis." I was like, wow, this guy is humble enough to be excited about working with them. And he'd already seen it all and did it all in the record industry. But for his record, he was happy to be working with them. And we got to meet with him. And the meeting just went well. It's like I met Monty, and it was like we knew each other our whole lives. And our managers connected. Mick Clark loved that we were getting along. And Monty was sitting there, and we came back to the hotel and went up to our rooms, and he came and hung out in our room. Our manager and his manager were in one corner talking, and me and Monty were at the table with a cup of coffee sitting there talking. And Monty was saying, "Yeah, I felt like I know you all my life." And he said, "Not for nothing, but the time was called Flight Time before we were the Time. And Alexander O'Neal was the lead vocalist. He said, we used to play your stuff in the clubs." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, we used to play Watching You and all that stuff." He said, "Prince used to throw your name in our face when we rehearsed." He said, "We were rehearsing to get better." And he said, Prince said, "Y'all think you're bad, huh? Y'all ain't better than Slave." And I said, man, when I heard that, I had to call the brothers and call them. "Do you know what Monty said, man?" I told the guys, and that just warmed their heart. They were like, wow, to hear that. But that was July. Set everything up. October, Star and I were flying back the first week and booked the studio time to start 3 songs for the Sirius album, which turned out to be the first Deja album. But when we started recording it, we hadn't changed the name yet. It was still Aurra. Now, Aurra, at that time, Stevie got wind that we were doing a new Aurra record, and he had claim to the name, ownership of the name, which I understood. And so that started coming out of the woodwork. So Virgin just said, "Okay, how are we going to handle this?" So Virgin said, "We either deal with him, or this is what we're thinking." Said, "Pick a name, change your name, we'll get behind it, and we'll figure it out, and we'll go from there." So my manager, Star, and I, our manager, we got together and we went through some names and at the office in New York, and we picked Deja. We found Deja, and it just made sense. It was like deja vu. We had already been here before, and this was like a second coming of what we did, and it just made sense. It tied in, and so we picked it. And so by the time the record was completed, it was no longer an Aurra record. It was a Deja record. And then You and Me Tonight came out of the woodwork once again, because politically, when we signed with Virgin and we had this record coming out, Mick Clark, who was a great A&R, one of the best A&R people, throwback to the original way A&R people were with record labels. They knew how to connect talent with the right people in production, and knew how to bring records along. He was a a throwback to that. One of the last original real A&R people that did it because they love music, you know. And he was supposed to get, because 10 Records was looking for a major distribution company for America, because they didn't have that yet. They had it for some other acts with MCA, but we were an act that he had just signed, and we didn't have a major distribution set up for our record, so we were looking for that. We had meetings. At that time, we had Mick was supposed to become president, head of promotion for Virgin in LA. The NAACP stepped in and stopped him, said you can't pick a white guy to head this off in a black music department. So what Virgin did was they went and got double protected themselves. They got a black woman, her name was Sharon Haywood, who had been in the music industry for a while and had strong ties, and to her credit was an extreme professional in what she did. She knew what she was doing, so they felt safe definitely going with somebody that had the credentials to do the job, and Sharon definitely had all of that. And so that's how that began, sort of a kind of a feud between Mick and that part, because sometimes it would clash, because that should have been Mick's. He felt like that could have been his spot, and it just worked out the way it did. Politically, politics played its part in almost everything. But so when Sharon heard the record, and she already knew about the tracks that we had, she was the one that was responsible for on the Deja. We were scheduled to release the song Serious as the first single. We shot a video on it and everything, down the Hudson River on a raft, all up and down. It was beautiful video and everything. That was supposed to be the first single. When she came along and was head of promotion, they pulled the plug on that and put You and Me Tonight on, because she was smart enough to pick that song and cover the bases and just cover her back with it, because that song was already a hit in the States, but you couldn't buy it the year before. So now to re-release it on the album with the act and the album with the group Deja and everything, and people were familiar with it, and Virgin was already committing to supporting the name Deja. And what they did on every album, to their credit, they supported it, and they had stickers on every album. Deja, formerly Aurra, and people recognized our faces and knew who we were. And right out the box, it jumped, and You and Me Tonight jumped to be a hit. And by the time we went back out to LA to have a meeting with the people, with Sharon Hayward and everybody in Los Angeles, the sales were out the box. Had already sold 200,000 copies right out of the box, because people were familiar with it and knew what was going on. So to her credit, she was smart enough and knew enough in the business. She had been in the business for a long time, so she was not a rookie by any means. She knew what she was doing, and that was a strong strategic move to make sure that we had a hit coming out of the box. And that's how You and Me Tonight. And it's funny because Star and I were tired of the song. We said, man, this song, man, this just keeps following us around, and I'm tired of that song. We wanted to do something new and everything. And one of the most intriguing things that I remember, my father, God rest his soul, he was still alive then, and he was like a hero of mine. And when I was starting in music, he had me listen to all his great jazz, collection, and Ray Charles and all these people. And then he said, oh, you going to play guitar? Well, you better listen to this guy. He played Kenny Burrell for me. And he had all these great people. When I brought home some of the new stuff, and I was telling him about the songs, I said, yeah, this one, man, it's been around. We're tired of it because they played it, and, it didn't get released here, but they played it, and we were just tired of it. and he listened to everything. He said, "Well, I heard what I heard, and you got some good stuff." He said, "I don't know what you're tired of, but whatever you're tired of, I'll tell you this one here, the one you say you're tired of, that's the one that moves the best." I said, "Pops," I said, "Wow, okay." And so he was confirmation with what they had already started moving forward on. So I said, "Well, I guess you and me tonight is going to have another life," and it sure did. It broke out and became a hit. We shot videos on it, and all in L.A. and Hollywood and Beverly Hills, and shot about 2 3 days worth of shots and everything. One in Beverly Hills where I was driving this sports car, Austin Healey sports car, and because my manager had called the house and spoke to my dad. I wasn't home yet, and I came home. My father was grinning. I said, What's up?" And he said, "Your manager called." I said, "Yeah." He said, he wanted to know if you knew how to drive a stick." I said, "You did?" I said, "Well," and then I said, "Yeah." He said, "Because they got a car for you in the video that you're going to be driving." And we both smiled because he taught me how to drive a stick because my first car was a standard shift. So he was grinning and I was grinning. He said, "Yeah, you told him, yeah." He said, "Yeah, I told him, yeah." So that was the car in the video. And then the other scene, which was very historic, was shot in the ballroom where you see Starlina and I dancing, and I'm on the piano playing piano solo and all. That was in the ballroom of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, the hotel where Robert Kennedy got shot after he made his last speech.
Wow.
And we knew this. We were shooting in the ballroom, and it was just we were going through takes and everything. And every time in between the takes, we stopped and we went over to the door and looked, going through the walkway through towards the kitchen where they were walking, where he got shot at. And we were just saying, this is just too bizarre. It's historic. Nobody's gonna believe this. This is just
Right.
really weird. Because I remember when that happened, and Rosie Greer, the football player, was there in support of Robert Kennedy. Rosie Greer was from Roselle, New Jersey, right next to Linden that I grew up with. Yeah, he was from Roselle. He was legendary Los Angeles Ram, but he was a Democratic supporter of Robert Kennedy. And he was there when Robert Kennedy got shot. So that ballroom was historic. We were just, it was amazing. And I was honored that we were able to be there and do that. And in later years, I remember hearing on the news sometime, it must have been in the 90s or something, where I heard that they had tore down the Ambassador Hotel. I said, "Oh, wow, that's a historic site," and nothing but incredible memories, you know, to be there.
Well, first, my condolences goes out on the loss of your father and your grandmother. And second of all, you mentioned Rosie Greer. I didn't know that he was from New Jersey
Yeah.
because me growing up, I thought he was all the way out in Los Angeles, California. You mentioned he's a
Hmm.
football player that I knew, and then later he became an actor. So the only Rosie Greer that I knew that he was in that movie called The Thing with Two Heads with
Yeah.
the late Ray Milland
Yeah.
and some other specials and other things. And you also mentioned he was a bodyguard for the late Senator Robert F. Kennedy. So that's something that the Rosie Greer that I knew growing up.
That's right.
Now,
Yeah.
after the band parted ways, you have your own band. You are the lead and the founder of your band, the Curt Jones Band.
Hmm.
How's the band coming along?
The band is fine. What has happened? I played with the Curt Jones band for a while just because I just felt like playing. It wasn't doing any major dates. I was playing in restaurants and intimate venues where you had good audiences and an intimate setting where people just enjoyed the music. And we were playing a lot of classic soul stuff, stuff that I just loved, and stuff that you couldn't go out and hear bands play. I didn't pick the stuff that was so traditional that you go out and hear 20 bands playing September by Earth, Wind and Fire. Not that September is not a great song, but it's just, it'd been played to death. I would go and try to reach out and play some classic heroes and music that made me want to do this stuff. Like I would go but the Curt Jones Band's origin actually started in Minneapolis. Because when I was working with a corporate band in Jersey, where we played a lot of wedding receptions and corporate uh, uh, affairs, did like the ballet music. We played down in Cancun. We did like uh, did a big festival down there with Ashford and Simpson, and we played, and just so we did things like that. We traveled to Aruba, played there, played different things, and we played a bunch of high-end wedding receptions in the metropolitan area, and so that work traditionally slows down right after the holidays into the first quarter. So I found myself driving out to Minneapolis, hooking up with my friend Monty, and because he had recorded his first record, and I went out there and while he was recording his first independent album, I had my acoustic guitar with me, and I said, "Yeah, I'll play something on there." And I actually played some acoustic guitar on one of the tracks on his first independent record. Well, that just led to a thing because he and I were just good friends from the Deja record from way back in '87, '86. So this is early 2000s we're talking about, 2000, 2001. And I'd go out there in the winter, and some friends of mine, they also knew that I was coming out. So they connected me with some of the guys that played with the Time and Prince. And they said, "Curt Jones is coming out here. He's from Slave and Aurra." They said, "Oh, yeah. I knew that." They said, "He must come out here and play downtown and do something. You want to play with him?" Man, they were all about it. They did. So I just got songs together and sent a cassette to the guys of the music that I wanted to play. And I was playing like classic Marvin Gaye stuff and, just classic soul stuff. And they loved the music. These guys were out on major tours, and they come in and play for like sometimes not even $100 on the night. They didn't care about that. They just liked the music, and they wanted to play play with it. So, and we called it the Curt Jones Band, and we got it going. And downtown, we tried it in this club, Jasmine's downtown. And the owners came. The owner was a former bass player, and he was a chef and the owner of the club. And he said, "You know what? A lot of people come down here and play, and they play with some of the same musicians you're playing with, but for some reason, they don't get the numbers in here that you're getting. And something is working about this." So they said, "We'd love to have you come and keep coming and play." And it got to a place where I could call. His name was Curt too, as well, which was ironic because I could call Curt at any time and say, "Hey man, I got some weekends free. Can I get a couple nights out there?" And he'd book it, and I'd come out and send the musicians I was going to play with the music that I want to play, and we'd go play downtown Minneapolis. And it was incredible. Kirk Johnson, the drummer, that used to play with Prince and was a dancer in some of his videos, and he was Prince's right-hand man. He's the one that found Prince in the elevator when Prince passed away. Kirk was the drummer with me, and Chance Howard, big guy that played in Prince's Coming to America tour and the MPG, keyboards and all that. Amazing singer, amazing bass player, keyboard player. Chance played bass for me. And we had musicians like that. Todd Burrell, classic keyboard player in Minneapolis downtown. Everybody in Minneapolis knows who he is. Brilliant keyboardist. I love him. He was so great. Every time we play something, it was just like harmony without trying. And we just had a great time playing some great music because these guys, I felt them, they had a love for the music that almost surpassed some of the people that I that I had worked with in the past. I was like, I can't imagine these guys not tripping about the money and all that. They said, man, that ain't important, man. Just let me know when you want to play. When Curt Johnson couldn't play, I had to find a drummer. Guess who I found? Downtown Minneapolis. Stokely from Mint Condition. Stokely came in and sat in with us and played. Stokely, he knew that I was from Slave, and he brought his father, because his father was a Slave fan, and introduced me to his dad. And we were playing Marvin Gaye and all that stuff. He was digging the music so much. He said, "You call me anytime." That wasn't the last time he sat in with me. And when he sat in, man, you could see it. Like people in the audience were like, knew he was there. And I was like, by the third song, I said, "Stop, man. These people know you're here, man. You want to sing something?" And he said, "Play a couple more songs. I'll let you know." So we played a couple more things. He said, "I got it." Man, he broke into a rendition of Creep by Stevie Wonder. I never heard anybody sing that song like that till this day. And he just blew it away. It was like everybody's jaw was dropped. It was a heat. And while he was playing the drums too, it was just brilliant. And that's the kind of talent I got blessed with, to be able to do that in Minneapolis. So that started the Curt Jones Band. And then when I came back to Jersey and I wanted to continue it, I started picking players that I worked with, that I knew, like the bass player that I was working with my corporate band, Bill Brady, incredible bass player. He's on some of my original CDs, some of the Curt Jones CDs. Incredible bass player, incredible musician. Him, keyboard player Vince Evans, who I went to school with, but in junior high school, we played in stage band together, and he was getting awards back then for keyboards, and then drummer Nats, Kevin Moore, Ignatz, drummer, the original drummer with Aurra, that played on the Make Up Your Mind album and all of that stuff. So I put it together that way, with the right talent, the right drummer, right bass player, keyboard and all that, and we just started playing restaurants and continuing what I was doing, playing a lot of classic R&B, a lot of stuff. And then just in, I want to say the last 5 years or so, I made a transition from the Curt Jones Band, and now that same band with a different bass player now and a different keyboard player, the original keyboard player from Aurra, Phil Field, and we don't call it the Curt Jones Band anymore. I'm calling it Curt Jones and Aurra, and we're playing Aurra's material. And when we do Aurra, shall play all of the material that I have a track record with some Aurra stuff. I mix it up with a couple of hits from Slave, and we mix it all up and play all of that for the people. And it seems to go over well. They seem to love it. And that's what, if I go out and we go out, we're looking to go out and perform that nationally and internationally if we can, because there's a fan base overseas. My wife and I, my wife Cece, sings the female lead parts and all the Aurra stuff. We went over to France in January and performed some of the Aurra catalog for people in France. And so that's kind of how it got going, and that's where it is now.
Okay. Now, I did download a couple of your songs from your recent LP on
Hmm.
iTunes. Now, speaking of Cece, your wife,
Hmm.
does she has any new music available on
She has.
iTunes?
When I moved down here, we did a whole album on her. That, and working on music is actually what brought us together. We started talking, and I found that she was actually working on a gospel project. She had a few songs that were being done there, and I said, well, And she had spent a lot of money trying to get this done. It wasn't even finished. I said, "You spent how much on 4 or 5 songs?" I said, "I'd do an R&B album on you, and you won't even spend that much on the whole album." And so we started. She wanted to do an R&B record, so we went to work on it. And we had gotten closer, and it became an item, and the music is part of the glue that brought us together. But then other things took place, and we just realized it was like easy math with each other. It was the right energy, it was the right time, and it just made perfect sense, and it all worked together. We had a feeling for each other in our hearts, and the music was definitely a big part of it as well, because we had a love for what we do, the same passion for it, and we worked hard on that and got that record. That record, we released it. Um, then I'll figure out. I'll ask her what year it actually came out. A couple years ago. It's called Levels of Love. Levels of Love, and that's her. You can find that out on Spotify and on iTunes and YouTube and different things, videos of that. And we had an actual title track. Levels of Love is a song that I did on her, and I had my friend Monty Moyer play a keyboard solo on that, because Monty was always on almost all of my original CDs, my independent CDs. We played something on it. We always did something on each other's projects. So yes, he has that album out, and right now what we're working on currently is a single for myself and a single for Cece. And I'm more than halfway done on both of those. And we were trying to get those completed by the end of this year, and get it mixed and mastered and get it out probably at the top of the new year.
Okay. Now, I have to say, you're from Linden, New Jersey, then moved to Minneapolis. Now you're residing in the state of Texas. How's everything down where you're at in the state of Texas?
It's pretty good. You know, I came down when I started talking with Cece, because she's from Texas, and she lived in McKinney. And Monty and I always talk. We said, Texas is cool, but I don't think I could live there. I said, the only place I think I could live there is San Antonio or Austin. We both said that. And then when I started coming down to see her, I was in a suburb called McKinney, and it was very nice, and I was surprised. I said, this is not bad. And kept coming down, and slowly but surely, one thing led to another, and we became serious enough where we decided, well, why don't we just get a place together? And we got an apartment in Grapevine, Texas, which was right in the middle between Dallas and Fort Worth. So in case we wanted to do any musical, engagements in either city, we were only 30 minutes from it each way, you know. And I met a lot of nice people down here. I love it. I love what it's about geographically. The climate is warm. It's hot in the summertime, but it's a drier heat with a drier breeze most of the time. And
Right.
whereas East Coast in July and February it gets hot, and then you get that real humid, high humidity. Now they'll get some humidity here, and they'll complain about it, but it's nowhere near the humidity that we get up there. So, and then that's just if you can get through the summer months, the rest of the year is mild. They don't really have winter. All my winter coats are still up in Jersey. I mean, I bought one because of a gig we did on New Year's Eve, and it was really cold that night. So I bought a London Fog trench with a lining in it so that I wouldn't freeze. We did have that. But in January and February here, in between 3 and 6 in the morning, it could drop down to like 30, maybe 25. But by that afternoon, by 12 or 1 o'clock, it could be 65, 70 degrees. I'll be outside barbecuing.
Now, here's a question that I always ask my guests:
Yeah.
living or dead, which group
or artist that you wish you wanted to tour with?
You said living or dead,
Mm-hmm.
which artist I would like to tour with?
Yeah.
Wow. Nobody ever asked me that one before. uh, well, uh, for sure, you know, it would have been great if I could have toured with Marvin. You know, I mean, here's an interesting little story about that. Like back in the 80s, Steve Arrington and I talk about this all the time. It happened with both of us around the same time in the same year. He had Steve Arrington's Hall of Fame out, and they opened up for Marvin on the last Marvin tour with Sexual Healing. And
Mm-hmm.
and because he knew Sheila E. Because when he left Dayton, Ohio, before Slave was even started, he went out to California to see if he could make it as a drummer. He met Coke Escovedo, Pete, and Sheila, and wound up working with them, playing with them out there. And Coke Escovedo played with Santana, all that. He was up there working with them. He opened up for Marvin on the Sexual Healing tour. Sheila was Marvin's percussionist on the Sexual Healing tour. And, uh, you know, in Stevie and I, in the tour bus, we always talk about our influences. And he knew Marvin was a big influence on me, on my style. And I knew Stevie Wonder was a big influence on him and his style. And he said, and so he met Marvin that year. And that same year, Starlene and I and Eban Kelly, who used to work with us he was one of the producers on You and Me Tonight. We were downtown New York, and we happened to be working in a hotel room on some songs for. Now don't let me forget his name. The actor that played with Don Johnson on Miami Vice.
Philip Michael Thomas.
Philip Michael Thomas. We were working in a hotel room trying to write some songs because he wanted to do a record, and we were coming up with some ideas. Well, one night we were finishing wrapping it up, coming up with ideas, and Eban said, "We need to go down to Radio City. My guy is down there. Stevie Wonder's playing there." I said, "Whoa!" And he can get us in. So we went down, and we go down there, and the guy got us in, and he recognized me and Starlene immediately. And we got in, and we're standing backstage, and Stevie's just smoking it, just killing it, and it's like I got my briefcase, and I'm standing there, and Eban's there, and Starlene is there, and then she goes down to the front to hang out and see it from the front. Well, Stevie stops and says, "I'd like to do something." He said, "Maybe I won't have to do this one day with this song, but maybe the climate will be where this won't be necessary, but right now I feel it's necessary. I'd like people from all colors, everyone, to come here, come on stage and join me on this song." And I'm standing there, and he said, "You need to go out there." I said, "Man," "I'm not going out there. That's you crazy. That's Stevie Wonder, man. I got my briefcase." He said, "Give me your briefcase." I said, "No, man, I'm not going." And then he signals over to his buddy that got us in, who was ushering people on stage, and he pulled me out there to Stevie, and Stevie's in the keyboard. He had the keyboards all around him, facing north, east, south, and west,
Right.
and he's in the middle of it. So I come out there, and all these people are around. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And the guy that ushered us in, he said, "No, you come here." And he put me down inside the keyboard booth behind a microphone
Ooh.
with Stevie's facing this way and I'm facing that way. And there's two more girls that were there behind the mic that I'm with. And he breaks into the song. He says, "Okay, this is the song I'm going to break into." Breaks into Ebony and Ivory. He said, because that's why
Oh,
he wanted everybody from all colors to sing. He said, maybe one day he
right.
won't have to do it that way, but
Hmm.
he breaks into it and he gets into the chorus and they're singing. And so they go into that chorus part that ebony, ivory, living in perfect harmony. And everybody's up on one note. So I just took the lower note just out of instinct, just to feel, cause so I can get it to sound like what he did on the record. And I did that, and I'm singing, and Stevie, he's rocking. He goes, "Oh, we got harmony here," and he gets up, claps his hand. "We got harmony here." I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me right now! I don't believe this is happening." I'm just, no. I said, "Nobody's ever gonna believe this." This is surreal, and we did it and finished it, and we go off, and I go backstage with eBay. He said, "Aren't you glad you went out there?" I said, "Man, I don't even believe I was out there. I can't even believe that just happened." And so then, after the show, he took us down to the dressing room, and there's a line of people there to meet Stevie. And I get to go meet Stevie, and he come up to us, me and Starlina, meeting him, and the lady says, "Stevie, this is Curt and Starlina from Aurra. He was on stage with you singing." And Stevie goes, "Oh, Aurra. Oh yeah, Aurra. Yeah." And my whole life, I always thought of some amazing thing that I would ever say to people like that, like him and Marvin. Like, "Man, you changed my life. You're everything. You meant everything to me." I got so choked up. All I could do was shake his hand. All I could do is go, "God bless you, Stevie." That's all I could say. I was, and we finished, and I'm like, get done, and the whole night is over, and I'm catching the train back over to Jersey to go back home by myself. And I'm like, "You stupid idiot. That's all you could say is God bless you. See, you idiot." I'm like, I'm mad at myself. When I go in the house and my parents are asleep, and I walk in their bedroom and turn on the light, I said, "Dad, Mom." And they were like, "Whoa, what's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, "I just got finished singing with Stevie Wonder." And it was just total silence in the room. They were half asleep. I guess they thought it was like a dream. And I sure felt like it was a dream. So I told Steve Arrington that story, and he tells me the story when he's opening up for Marvin. He's in the dressing room. Marvin, he'd done his show, and Marvin's going by, getting ready to go to the stage, and he walks by the door, and he stops and sees Steve. He backs up, and he walks in, and Marvin's entourage follows him into the dressing room. He goes, "You're Steve Arrington, aren't you?" He's and Stevie's humble. He goes, "Oh man, Marvin, man." He said, "I saw you on Soul Train." He said, "You're gonna be a big star one day." And Stevie had his head down. He didn't even want to look at Marvin. He's like, "Oh man, Marvin, come on, man. You the cat, man. You're the cat, man." He said, "I can't. Come on, man. Come on." And Marvin looked at him and pointed to his entourage and pointed down at him and said, and he's humble too, pointed at him and said, "He's one," and walked out. And Steve said, "Man, he didn't have to come in there and do that. He just chose to do that." And then we talked about it. I told him that we exchanged stories. He said, "Man, you met my cat and I met your cat." I said, "Wow, how weird is that, Yeah.
Yeah. Now, here on the Black Soul Music Experience, I always ask my guests who is the top 10 R&B black artist of all time. Now, since I have you, cousin, I'm going to be doing my favorite. I'll be doing the Black Soul Music Experience top 10 soul, funk, classic soul artists of all time. Now, here's how it works. We do it like a top 10 countdown, like the show America's Top 10, hosted by the late Casey Kasem. We start at the bottom 5, which was the best groups but didn't get any recognition. And when we get to the top 5, we'll find out what was the best groups of all time. Did that group had those top 10 number 1 hits? Did they had those albums that sold gold and platinum, double platinum, triple platinum, and today's diamond platinum? Did that group receive an American Music Award or a Grammy? or a BET award, or a Soul Train award, or an MTV VMA award, or did that group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Did that group performed on American Bandstand, or Soul Train, or the Midnight Special, or NBC's Saturday Night Live, and yes, Don Kirshner's rock concert? Or did they perform on Solid Gold? Or did they have that music video aired on MTV or VH1 or BET or any of those local shows? Or did they have that live special airing on HBO or Showtime? Or did they have that primetime special aired on CBS or NBC or ABC? Or did they have that special on PBS, whether it's on Great Performances, or they had that special during Pledge Month? So here's some of my top 10 groups of all time. So I'm starting with number 10. Number 10, I'm starting off with Bloodstone, that came on the scene back in 1973 with that song, And I'll take you to the sky on the natural high, loving you more. That was the best song that I liked. And they had some other hits during the later 70s, but didn't get that much airplay. But then by the early 80s, they came back with that song, You and Me, Girl, Go a Long, Long Way Back. And they were on the T-Neck label, which was produced by the Isley Brothers. With that album, We Go a Long Way Back. I was like, I didn't know that was Bloodstone doing that singing. I was like, oh, wow. And that was a top 10 hit. I heard it on black radio, including when we had Kiss FM back in the NYC. So I'm going to put down Bloodstone at number 10. Number 9, I'm putting down Rolls Royce, which came on the scene in 1976 with their song Car Wash. Number 1 hit on Billboard's Soul Singles Charts back in December 1976, and number 1 on Billboard's Hot 100 Pop Singles Charts in January of 1977. That was from the movie Car Wash, which had Richard Pryor and George Carlin and the Pointer Sisters and Ivan Dixon, and Bill Duke. That's the one who played Abdullah.
That's right.
Good soundtrack and everything. So I'm putting Rolls Royce down at number 9. They have other hits, including Wishing Upon a Star, Love Don't Live Here Anymore. So I put down Rolls Royce at number 9. Number 8, Heat Wave, came on the scene in the fall of 1977 with their top 10 hit Boogie Nights and their follow-up song Always and Forever. And then they had another LP called Central Heating with their song called The Groove Line and many other hits. So even though it didn't get that much recognition, I put down Heat Wave at number 8. Number 7, I'm putting a tie with Confunction and LTD. Confunction had their singles back in the late 70s and early 80s with their song Fun, Fun, Fun. When they get to that ba-da, 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 ba-da. That was the bridge. And that love ballad, Love Strain, 1983. Oh, man. That was the best love ballad ever. So I put Confunction at number 7. And LTD, Love, Togetherness, and Devotion with Jeffrey Osborne on lead, had these number 1 hits, Love, Ballad, oh my goodness. And then I'm back in love again. And then Holding On, We Both Deserve Each Other's Love. Where did we go wrong?
Deserve each other's love.
I'm telling you, that was one of those best love ballads ever. So I put Confunction and LTD at number 7. Number 6, I'm putting another tie. Fred Wesley and the JBs. That's co-founded by the godfather of soul, Mr. James Brown. They had a couple of hits, including Give Me Some More and Pass the Peas. So those tracks were later sampled by today's hip-hop artists. So I put Fred Wesley and the JBs And I tied it with the Average White Band, or AWB, representing Scotland. They had their number one hit, Pick Up the Pieces, back in the spring of 1975, and they had some other hits, including A Love of Our Own. First time hearing that ballad came out of 1976, and they had a other couple of songs, including Schoolboy Crush, and that song was later sampled by Junior Mafia. Players, Biggie. They sampled that song. I was like, man. So I put down Fred Wesley and the JBs and AWB at number 6. Number 5, another tie. I put down BT Express with their hits Do It Till You're Satisfied and Express and all those other hits. So I put BT Express and I tied it with Earth, Wind and Fire, formed back in 1969 by the late Maurice White. They had a ton of hits, including Evo, Shining Star, That's the Way of the World, Reasons, September, Non-Stop Hits, just to name a few. They were winners. They had Grammys. They had American Music Awards. Got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the class of 2000 and Kennedy Center honorees for the class of 2019. So they're still performing today, even though Maurice White is no longer with us. So you still got Philip Bailey, and some of the other members are still continuing performing. And so I'm putting down the tie, BT Express and Earth, Wind and Fire at number 5. Number 4, I'm putting another tie, Kool and the Gang, coming out of Jersey. Back then they were known as the Jazzy Acts. They would do all genres. They would do jazz. They would do acid jazz, smooth jazz, funk, and then disco and pop. So they kept up with the times. So I put down Kool and the Gang at number 4. Best known for their hits including Summer Madness, Jungle Boogie, Funky Stuff, Ladies Night, Celebration, just to name a few. And I tie that with Parliament Funkadelic, founded by Mr. George Clinton. When I first saw him, I was like, what's he wearing? I see all this stuff on his hair and all that stuff. And they had some hits, including Tear Off the Roof Off This Sucker, We Got the Funk, Flashlight, Not Just Knee Deep, Atomic Dog. I mean, everything. It was all funk. And every time I see them perform, I was like, what are the group wearing? I see one guy wearing a diaper, and then you got the mothership coming down, and you know that group was influenced by Dr. Dre and all the other hip-hop rappers coming out of the West Coast. So when I went to the Smithsonian's African American History Museum, there it was, that spaceship, Mothership Connection spaceship. And they had that other song that I like, Chocolate City. That's the one that I like. So I put down Kool and the Gang and Parliament Funkadelic at number 4. Number 3, I put another tie, Zap, that's founded by the late Roger Troutman. He is known for using that little voice thing. And they had some hits, including Computer Love, I Just Want to Be Your Man, and just to name a few. I've seen the videos non-stop, so I put Zap right there, tied up with Cameo. Now, they came on the scene back in the late 70s. Back then, they had a love ballad hit, and it was called Sparkle, and it was called Why Haven't I Lost You? I didn't know that they had those love ballads back then. And then later they'll be known for its up-tempo hits, including Rigor Mortis, and then that song that came out called She's Strange, and other hits including Candy and Word Up, just to name a few. So I put Cameo tied up with Zap at number 3. Number 2, I put another time, put down the Ohio Players. Man, I've seen their wardrobes. We mentioned the album covers with all the ladies on there. known for their hits including Funky Worm, Skin Tight, Fire, and Ushiku, Honey, and Sweet Sticky Thing, and Love Roller Coaster. Man,
Yeah.
they were non-stop during the 70s. And then I tie that with the Isley Brothers. They were around back in the late 50s with Shout. That was with Ronald and O'Kelly and Rudolph. And then by the 70s, they added their other brothers along. Ernie Isley with the guitar, and Marvin Isley and their relative Chris Jasper. Stringer hits during the 70s with Who's That Lady and Fight the Power, Living It Up, and their love ballads, including For the Love of You and Groove With You. Non-stop hits during the 70s. So I put that a tie with the Ohio Players and the Isley Brothers at number 2. And last but not least, number 1, I put down your group, cuz Slave. I put that down. I said, I couldn't leave my cousin out of this. We mentioned the song Slide, Just a Touch of Love, Watching You, all of that. They had some hits. They still playing it at the clubs on Friday night. So I had to put down your group, Slave, at number 1. So before we do that, I want to mention some bonuses. I want to mention Switch, which had Bobby DeBarge in it, formed it by Jermaine Jackson, and also Casey and the Sunshine Band, first integrated group with Harry Wayne Casey, known as KC, and everybody. So I wanted to get those bonuses in, so I didn't want to leave those guys out. So that's my top 10 R&B, classic soul, and funk groups of all time.
That's pretty good. That's very good.
Yes, so so that's my top 10 hits of all time. Well, Cousin Curt, thank you so much for being here on the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for all of those memories with you done with the group Slave, and then with your group Aurra that later changed to Deja, and your band. And like I said earlier, I got a chance to download a couple of your songs and your wife's music too. So thank you so much for being here. And I want to give a shout out to your sister, my cousin Lisa Jones again. Thank you, cousin Lisa, for getting the time out to interview your brother, which I didn't know that he was in a major band back in the late 70s. So when they'll see this episode, they'll be like, you got a cousin who's in a major band? I said, Because like every family reunion that I go to, you never know who you may bump into. That's
true.
my motto.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
Yes. Now, before we go, where can we follow you on social media? I just mentioned your LP, which is available on iTunes, and they can check out all the videos on YouTube, and your wife Cece also. So where can we follow you for social media?
We're both on Facebook and Instagram, you know. I'm on the Shreds app as well. But I would say Instagram and Facebook are the main ones right now. Yeah. Okay. And
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so we'll be following you every day. Download all of the groups that we just talked about on this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Visit iTunes.com, Spotify.com, or purchase a CD at Amazon.com. And make sure you follow Slave and Curt Jones, Steve Arrington. Follow them on Facebook and also follow them on Instagram. Make sure you check out my cousin Curt Jones with his band. It's available now on iTunes. And don't forget to check out CeCe Jones. Her album is available right now on iTunes. and check out their music videos airing right now on YouTube. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to check out this episode, please subscribe by going to the link. The link is riverside.fm/studio/Samuel-Wilson Jr.'s. Don't forget the at the S at the end, -studio. And yes, I will be posting this episode on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you have a hard time getting on to riverside.fm, then please become a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Go to the Patreon homepage. Make sure you put in your email address and your password, where you can check out all of the Patreon shows by different creators, and go to the top search box and type in the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast, where you can check out all of my audio podcast episodes and video podcast clips that you may have missed. And if you have a hard time getting on to Patreon, then I will be posting this episode on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Make sure you check out all of my podcast episodes from season 4 and for season 5. If you love this episode, if you love my podcast, please subscribe, please support, please give me a thumbs up, please leave a comment, and please pass it on. Thank you for joining me as I close out this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience.
Well, that's about it for this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. I'm Sam Wilson Jr. Thank you for joining me, and please tune in next week for an all-new episode. The Black Soul Music Experience Podcast is sponsored by the support of listeners and viewers like you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Look for my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Pocket Cast. And don't forget the link. The link is riverside.fm/studio/Samuel-Wilson Jr.'s-studio. And don't forget to check out my audio and video podcast episodes by becoming a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. And please check out my video podcast episodes by subscribing to youtube.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. And please leave your comments, feedbacks, and replies by going to my Facebook homepage. Go to facebook.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. You can also tweet me on X, a.k.a. Twitter, at Sam Wilson Jr. 66. And follow me on Instagram at SAMM.Y2980. As always, partying, remember this. Reach for the top and your dreams will come true, and it can happen to you. From all of us, take care. God bless. Thanks for listening. Have a good week, and please be safe.